Hey everyone, host of Shelves, Jeremy Meyer here. If you like the podcast, I thought I'd recommend a couple others for you. If you want to hear more about unproduced scripts, check out Screenplay Archaeology. If you want to hear some other movie or entertainment-related discussion, check out the Entertainment Buffet podcast. If you're interested in some video game discussion, check out my friends over at the Darkcast and darkstation.com. Also be sure to visit some of our friends of the show, the Nerds and Marks podcast and 616 Entertainment. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Well, hello, everyone. It's been a long time since I've actually sat down and recorded an episode. My last episode's being from C2E2, I believe, in Chicago, where I did a couple of interviews, but it's been kind of a long time since I've actually sat down and talked about a movie, or a script, rather. I have talked about some movies, and there was a big movie that just came out, Avengers Endgame, that I wanted to do the review that I did for Infinity War, where I try to get as many people on to kind of give their thoughts on the movie as possible. But then I got sick, and I've been pretty sick, and I actually meant to put this episode out last Monday, but I got sick to the point where I lost my voice and I was very congested. And I think I'm pretty much past it now, but there could be a couple times where I cough or clear my throat through this, just kind of dealing with some residual stuff from that. So if any of that pops up, I just want to take my time and apologize. But yeah, I'm back. It's been a while. I've been missing this. And to be a little honest, I've been a little lazy on my podcast duties. There's just been so much going on. I got back from a vacation and then into some busy work and then into a sickness, and then there was a lot of stuff kind of getting in the way, and I've been working on trying to put together some other interview stuff. But yeah, it's been a while since I'd done a movie, done a script, and there's one that I've had for a long time that I've been wanting to cover since the beginning of my podcast. When I first got scripts, I got this one that I was wanting to do and was holding on to for a special occasion, and I've kind of just hit the point where it's you know what, fuck it. It's been a while since I've covered a script. I'm just gonna do it, and I'm going to, I want to read something I enjoy. I had promised somebody I was going to do Freddy versus Jason as my next script, and honestly, I was reading it and I just wasn't liking it. I wasn't getting through it. It was very boring, and maybe for around Halloween time I'll give it an honest shot. But sorry if you're still listening, if you're still listening to the show. I tried to get into it, but I couldn't, and I wasn't feeling inspired, so I needed to just put it down and start reading something that I actually wanted to read, which if you can already tell by today's title, that script is Uncharted, and that is based on the video game series, the first one, Uncharted, Drake's Fortune, which is one of my favorite video game franchises. It's kind of like a modern Indiana Jones, and treasure hunter Nathan Drake, and I really love the franchise. I really love the series, and I love video game movies. It's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I try to watch every video game movie. And one day I want to do some extensive coverage of video game movie stuff. I have a lot of video game movie scripts that I want to do. And, I was sitting on an Uncharted script, and then, friend of the show and host of Screenplay Archaeology, another podcast, he actually informed me that the Uncharted script that I have was, it's iffy on if it's real. And, I'm still in a place with this podcast of do I care if it's confirmed real or not? Part of me is just no, if it's a script that's out there, I would like to just say beforehand, just be look, I have no confirmation on if this one is legit or not, but it might be, it might not be, but I'm gonna read it. And that was supposed to be for the David O. Russell version. The version I am reading, which is confirmed to be real, is the draft of the script by David Guggenheim that was going to be directed by Seth Gordon and has been canceled at this point. At this point, there's been, I think, 3 or 4 different attempts at an Uncharted movie. And now the most recent one is actually starring Tom Holland. They're going to do like a younger Nathan Drake, which, again, I'm not convinced this movie is actually going to come out. We haven't heard any news on it for a while. The last bit of news came out in January and was the director, which is Dan Trachtenberg, I think, or David Trachtenberg, the guy who directed 10 Cloverfield Lane, that's a great movie, is very well directed. I believe he's under the tutelage of J.J. Abrams, so I would love to see somebody like him tackle a big adventure movie, and I think he would be a good choice. So we're going to jump into it, and kind of one of the first things I will say is when it comes to being an Uncharted movie, this script kind of nails it, and then in other ways is just kind of there, just kind of like plodding along. Overall, I would say if this movie got made, it would be kind of an average movie, but maybe like a little kicked up because it would be a big adventure movie. There's like globetrotting and some actually really good action set pieces the way they're described in the script. But we also have the curse of now all of the Uncharted games are out and they say the franchise is done, and we know a lot more about the history of the character of Nathan Drake and everything. And this script plays with some of the stuff that's introduced in the first game that you find out is kind of complete bullshit by the time you reach the last game. And I'll talk about that as I get to the points. But let's jump into the script, shall we? I got my notes here. And so we open in present day with like a bloody face, and we're not really seeing who it is. But then we immediately cut back to 1989. And we're into Land Rover with Peter Drake, his colleague Lenny, and his son, who is 9-year-old Nathan Drake. And they're at a dig site where they find these like tunnels underneath an old church in Portugal with the bodies of like Sir Francis Drake's men. And if you remember from the video game, Sir Francis Drake is kind of the thing that, or the person that pushes a lot of the plot forward. The whole setup is that Drake is supposedly a descendant of Sir Francis Drake, and a lot of that plays a big part in the story of this movie. But in the game by Uncharted 4, you find out that is not true. It's just in Uncharted 4 they reveal that like when they were kids, him and his brother, when they like escaped from an orphanage, they changed their name to Drake, kind of based on their mother's obsession with like learning about Sir Francis Drake and stuff like that. And this kind of just plays it straight of like, no, like, is Drake a descendant of Sir Francis and the famous explorer? And that is kind of the thing that pushes him through the story. So they're checking out this like church. They find this like basically like mass grave of like a bunch of Sir Francis Drake's men. And I have a screenshot here from something I wanted to read. See if it's actually like important to what I need to talk about, because it looks like it was just basically them describing something. All right, now it's not really important. Oh wait, actually here it is. So this is a line of dialogue from Drake's dad. It says, "We know at the time of his death, the Spanish were aggressively hunting Sir Francis, and legend has it that groups of his men were sent separately with tokens that when brought together would show the crown where Sir Francis was headed. The only way to know if these are his men would be if they had one of these tokens." So they find the token, and that's how they find out like, oh, these are actually Sir Francis Drake's men. So Nathan crawls down to like where the bodies are, and he finds a ring inside one of the skeleton's mouths, and he turns it, and like little gears pop out on the side of the ring. This will be important for later. So we cut to the present day, and now we find out the beat-up face now belongs to a 30-year-old Nathan Drake, who's been shot up and is inside some plane wreckage. This is kind of reminiscent of the second video game, if you played the Uncharted series, Uncharted 2, which was very good, probably the best one of the franchise, although 4 is probably my favorite. That one kind of opens with him on a train that's like dangling off a cliff, like the Lost World style, and this whole plane sequence is kind of reminiscent of that. So yeah, we hear the. Oh man, my notes are pretty bad here. It looks like I missed some stuff. So yeah, we see he's in the wreckage. Then we cut back to when he's a kid, and we see the murder of his parents. His dad and Lenny tell him to hide under the bed, and his parents get killed. They're looking for the ring, which Drake has on a necklace around his neck, and we see like some arms come down, and we see some tattoos on the arms of the man who killed Drake's parents. So he's under the bed, panicking, and then we cut back to the modern day, and the plane has crashed in the snowy, some snowy mountains. It's a place I can't pronounce, and I'm not going to butcher it, but let's just say some foreign mountains, and they're very snowy. The pilot is shown to be dead from bullet wounds. There's an unnamed passenger, and Drake has a piece of the plane like stuck in his leg. So we're kind of jumping in, and shit's already messed up. It's kind of the end of one of his adventures. Drake pulls out the piece of the plane, and he makes a tourniquet out of a parachute, and the passenger, whose name is Tarek, wakes up, and he's asking Drake where the statues are. As I said, we're kind of just jumping into the end of one of his adventures. Sorry, I had to shift and lost my notes here. They both start like shooting at each other, but only Drake is actually able to land a fatal hit. And he finds these Chinese statues that are on the plane, and he like shoves them into his backpack. And this kind of sets off probably the most exciting part of the movie, which is this kind of opening action sequence. And so like a helicopter shows up and like starts dropping mercenaries onto the scene, and they pin Drake down in the plane. So he decides he's just gonna fucking drive the plane off the cliff. He goes to the controls and like releases the landing gear, which causes the plane to just start sliding down the mountain. One of the mercenaries is kind of fighting with him when this happens in the cockpit. Like he notices what's happening and runs in and starts attacking him. Drake starts running to the back of the plane, which is fast approaching the drop off, and he grabs a fire axe as he's on his way out. The plane goes off, and he sticks the axe into the side of the cliff. And, as the plane goes off, very exciting stuff. And, of course, the mercenary hanging on to him. This is a very good moment of like, oh, this is just like a situation of bad going to worse and like amping up the tension. He's hanging on, like the mercenary's holding onto his backpack or whatever. And of course, the backpack ends up breaking, and the mercenary falls down with the backpack and the statues inside, so Drake doesn't even get his payday. So from there, we cut to the Louvre, which I don't know if you know is like a museum in Paris, I believe. And we meet Navarro, who's like a guy who works for the museum. Navarro introduces us to Gabriel Roman, who is like the main villain of the movie, and if you've played the first game, you know who these characters are. Roman will be the villain. Navarro is kind of like his counterpart. As Roman, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it is Roman, right? Okay, yeah. So Roman, he's being brought into this museum to give a speech. And as this is happening, so like 5 men in tactical gear are breaking into the museum. So Roman, he starts his speech, and this is all intercut with these men moving through the sewers and like getting into the museum like they're looking for something. Roman finishes his speech, and he starts like playing a video for his company. So everybody is paying attention to the video, and as this is going on, Roman sneaks away and starts assisting with the robbery and like tranks a guard and puts on the loop security footage. He uses a grapple gun and slides through some vents before landing in front of the team breaking in front of the Latin American Antiquities wing. And they are stealing a vase of like a snake. And so, all this is going on as this video is playing. And then right as the video ends, Roman walks back up to the podium, and it was like he never left, which is like a fun little heist sequence. and exactly the kind of thing I would want in a movie like this. Uncharted generally only focuses on Nathan and whatever he's doing. We don't really see stuff like this in the games, but it is kind of reminiscent of a scene in Uncharted 4, so it's kind of fun. They steal the statue, and then we cut to Roman's estate, and it turns out like Navarro was in on it, and he was helping him. Like, he's the one who got Roman in so they could steal the thing. And then Navarro has a nice comment about, how the museums and stuff has pillaged so much of his culture that it's time that he pillaged back. So they end up dissolving the vase, and what they get out of it is a golden disc. And this is like an astrolabe, which is like an old navigation device, used back in the days of like Christopher Columbus and stuff for navigating like the seas. They get a piece of this, and they put together a device, but there's a piece missing, which, is like a little ring that needs some gears, which hint, hint. And this is when we cut to Indonesia, and Drake is getting out of a taxi into like his loft where he's living. The city's described as dangerous, which is, makes sense as like not like grave robber, but, a treasure hunter would, make home. He gets home and he's taking care of himself, gets all cleaned up, and his buddy Sully comes in, which Sully is his old man friend who's kind of fellow treasure hunter. If you've played the games, you know all these characters. He comes in and is, they're all talking about being broke, and Drake saying that the only work out there is being black market work. But then Sully tells him that, Gabriel Roman wants to meet him for a job. So Drake goes to meet with Roman, and they want to buy his ring off of him because they want to use it to find El Dorado. And we get a little talk about how Drake's parents believed they were descendants of Sir Francis, but Drake himself never believed it. So, to him, it kind of just doesn't mean anything. So he's like, yeah, I'm totally willing to sell the ring, but I don't have it. And which, is a departure from the game. In the game, he's, very attached to the ring, but I guess technically this stuff could be kind of like before that, even though the stories don't really intersect. It is telling of that story. But yeah, so he says he doesn't have the ring, and that's with the guy, Jose Cruz. So now we cut to Paraguay. Again, globetrotting is exactly what I would want in an Uncharted movie. As I was reading this, I did kind of think of like, what would I want in a movie? Because I'm willing to let a lot of things slide with a video game movie as long as they get the essence right. Then I'm totally fine with it. Like the Tomb Raider movie is a really good example of, they don't follow the plot of the game, even though it is based on that reboot series, but they do kind of get it right. And it's not the exact plot, but it's close enough. And this script kind of reads the same. Like, it's not an exact plot, but it's close enough. And I will say, I do think I would, if this movie came out and was like well directed. I'm not really familiar with Seth Gordon as a director, or maybe I am, and I just don't know him by name. But, I don't know what he could have done with this, but following the script, I think I could have liked this movie. We cut to Paraguay. Drake is at a restaurant. He goes to meet with Cruz, who's like this, shitty gangster guy. He doesn't like Drake. Drake is clearly, they've had issues in the past, and he's not going to give him his ring back. He's just like, you know what, screw you. Like, I should kill you and blah, blah, blah. And you shouldn't even get your ring. So, Drake's, all right, well, I got to steal this thing back. So he goes to the bar, and there's some, like, they have the bartender passing him stuff. Before that, we do have a good scene where Cruz is doing a deal with a guy who's selling fake passports. And, like, it turns out these aren't his fake passports. He got them from somebody else, and he lied about it. But Cruz is like, yeah, I'm going to pay you the money. It's like, you're the one that did the job or whatever. But then because he lied, he makes him stick his hand in a deep fryer. So it's like, yeah, there's some honor among thieves, I guess. Drake asks for his ring and says he'll give him the money plus interest. But Cruz hates Drake and says that, he get his money and he won't kill him. How about that? So then Drake goes to the bar and exchanges an envelope for a flash drive with the bartender, which is something we never really get details on. It's stuff he's going to need for the heist and blah, blah, blah. And this is where we meet Elena, who is the main female protagonist in the game. Elena was a journalist, and she was following along with Drake, and then she kind of gets left behind, and then shows up anyway because hey, you promised me this shit. In the first game, she works for like a one of those like weird Discovery Channel type shows, and they screw her over, but then she ends up coming along anyway. Like she follows them. So yeah, he meets her and he introduces himself as Ian Riggins. And like he says, he's a consultant. But she can kind of sniff him out, and she tells him he's a journalist. They flirt and end up like, he follows her out of the bar, and she's looking at this necklace at some like stand on the street, and then he ends up flirting with her some more, and of course they hook up. They do their thing. And in the morning, she's gone, but like leaves the necklace on the pillow, and with like a note that says like you want what you can't have, or you want but you can't have, something like that, which is a thing that will reoccur throughout the movie. Drake checks the flash drive, and it's like got security information on Cruz's compound. So then we cut to Drake breaking in. He's wearing a security uniform. It's like a colored uniform. But then, like, when he runs into another guard, it turns out the uniform was the wrong color because the data on the flash drive was out of date. So then that kind of turns into a shit show. Like, he gets into a scuffle, and he manages to, like, find a proper security outfit, which is, kind of an unnecessary moment, but, a little fun. So he gets into Cruz's office, and, he checks the safe, but the ring isn't in there. But then Cruz stumbles in drunk with some girl, and they walk into a bedroom, and they don't even notice Drake, and he sees that he's wearing the ring. So then Drake ends up cutting the lights, but he gets caught by a guard that Cruz ends up shooting through the door and like killing the guard. So then him and Drake get into a fight, and Cruz accidentally shoots himself. So then Drake's able to grab his ring and get out of there. But at this point, the compound gets invaded by police, and then Drake meets Elena again, who turns out she's actually a special agent. This is the thing. So in the game, she's just a journalist. She is strictly a journalist, and I don't really like the turning her into a special agent. I feel like they do it to make it more believable that she's okay with handling guns and blah blah blah. But honestly, if you're a journalist who like her in the game, she goes to like war-torn countries and stuff, and like the second game and stuff, like she's gonna be comfortable around danger, like you don't need that. And like it's an adventure movie, everybody's kind of got their little training that you don't really need to worry too much about, and I don't think making her a special agent was really necessary. So Drake ends up escaping, and Elena's told that by her boss that like she needs to go back. Like they were monitoring Cruz, and now it's all messed up, and she's got to go back. So Nathan and Sully bring the ring to Gabriel and Navarro, and they show him the astrolabe, and he gives them the ring, and they activate the device and get coordinates that Drake translates to off the coast of Nicaragua. So Gabriel tries to kill them by drowning them in the car, because it's like, we're done with you. We weren't actually going to pay you. Well, because they said they're going to pay him like $10 million for the ring, which is why he was like, yeah, fine. Let's get rid of it. So, they end up escaping, and they're on a train getting out of there. I should point out he tries to drown them by putting them in a car and then driving the car into a lake. And they do a thing that I've seen in a couple movies now, where they get out and they use the air from the tire to stay underwater longer, because there's somebody waiting at the top, and they're probably dead by now, and they take off. So now we're on a train, and Sully's talking about booking flights to Nicaragua or whatever, but turns out Nate lied and told them Nicaragua, but they're really searching for it's somewhere near the Panama Canal. So it's like he kind of picked up on what was going on and gave him some false information to kind of lead him away for a while. And while this is going on, back at Elena's office, she's getting reamed out by her boss. She's said the Cruz job was a botch and that she needs to step away now. Elena kind of goes and looks over the security footage, and we learn about Nathan's past, like he was in the army, and then he just kind of like fell off the face of the earth. Putting him in the army, I think, is fine. We never got much information on Nate's past post, like being a kid. Like I think you see him as like a preteen and like a teenager in 3 and 4, and then we never really see anything beyond that. Like him going in the military, it's totally fine, and gives you some retrospect on why he's so capable of doing what he's doing. So all of this is intercut. Well, as she's learning about his past, it's intercut with Nathan and Sully renting a boat, and they find Sir Francis Drake's coffin, which is similar to how the first game opens. But instead of inside finding his journal, they just find like a wooden panel with the etching of a ship on it that Drake believes is a map. And so while this is happening, mercenaries show up and start like attacking them, which is, again, pretty similar to the game. So they get into like a boat chase and manage to escape, which is, another bit of an exciting action sequence. As I said, there are some pretty good action sequences in this that I think could have made it a pretty exciting movie. So they show up at a Panama internet cafe, and Drake discovers that sorry, I think I misspelled something. Discovers the best key across on the boat. Oh, okay, so he discovers there's like an etching of the boat on the wood, and he finds out that it's basically leading to the next clue, which points him to the Tower of London. They need to get Queen Elizabeth's scepter that was she was buried with. And as this is going on, Elena ends up pulling up outside the internet cafe. Her bosses told her to leave it alone, but she's going after Drake anyway. And, they see her, but Drake and Sully sneak out before Elena finds them, but Drake leaves the necklace and she finds it. It's kind of like, a fun little cat and mouse game that they're playing with this necklace. So now we go back to Roman's estate and the mercenaries. So like what happened was they had the pictures. I forgot to mention this. They had the pictures of the wood board when they got attacked by mercenaries, and they send them off to some guy that Sully knows of the CIA to try to find out the key to solve it. And the mercenaries ended up with the real board, so now they bring it back to Roman, and they find out about the scepter as well. So now it's kind of everybody convening to, we got to get to London. So now we cut to London, and Drake and Sully get to the Tower of London to discover that the scepter has already been robbed. And they find a contact of Drake's, Dr. Blair Upton, who's, it's a woman, somebody he has had a fling with in the past. And Blair tries to get Drake arrested because, they go to talk to her and they're like, hey, we know that this thing has been stolen. So she thinks they're kind of in on it. So, they end up escaping. And Drake realizes that the scepter that was stolen was a fake and that the real one must be buried with the queen. I think I let that slip a little bit earlier. I said it was buried with the Queen before, but it was just in the Tower of London. The Queen is not buried in the Tower of London. She's at Westminster Abbey, which is where they show up. So, on the ship, Navarro and Gabriel, they have the scepter. They're hanging out at the harbor, and they discover that their scepter is fake, and they think that Drake can lead them to the real one. Like, they know he's got to be here. So we go to Westminster Abbey, where a bomb threat has been called in. So Elena shows up, and a bomb squad goes in. And this part I thought was a little confusing. Like, Drake is kind of hiding inside, and I don't understand why, if you're going to call a bomb threat, you're also going to hide inside. It just seemed like unnecessary tension. So Drake's, he sneaks through the tomb, like avoiding the bomb squad guys, and he ends up finding the scepter, but gets caught by Elena, who, she spotted Sully in the crowd, so she knew he was there, and she went in and, she catches him. So Drake talks Elena down, was saying, hey, we're both an ambitious type, and she can't stand that he got one up on her, and that's why she's going after him. But Elena ends up arresting him anyway. She puts him in a van, and Drake starts to tell her about Gabriel Roman as the van's taking them away. But the van is attacked, and Roman's gunmen's, they come out and they kill the cops, and they end up getting the scepter. Drake, he tells Elena to play like a prisoner, because then they won't kill her if they think she's with Drake. So, like, she, as they're still in the van, she kind of puts on some handcuffs and stuff and pretends to be like she was with him. And, Roman's men come and, like, grab Drake and Elena. And Sully shows up, and he tries to take some action into his own hands, and Sully gets shot. And Drake and Elena are taken prisoner, and Sully is, he's believed to be dead. spoiler alert, he's not dead. They can't kill Sully, but he takes like 3 shots in the chest, and even I was like, oh damn, they killed Sully. I wouldn't do that if I was making this movie, but all right. And then it turns out later that they didn't, but we'll get there. So yeah, they get taken aboard a cargo ship, and Roman taunts Drake, who ends up choking him. And Roman says to shoot Elena to get Drake to stop, because they know like Drake doesn't care about anything else, but he'll protect the girl. So they make Drake read the rest of the map through the diamond on the scepter, but that turns out to be a misdirect. And instead, he places it on the Nook, and it reflects the map. I don't know, I guess really how to explain it, but somehow with putting the diamond on the scepter with the board, it like reflects. Jesus Christ, I can't talk today. Reflects the map, and instead they find out that they have to go to the Amazon, which again, play the games. The statue is I'm sorry. I don't even remember if I am so out of practice. You can tell I need to do more episodes. I don't even know if I remember I said they were searching for El Dorado. In the first Uncharted game, they are searching for these, what most people believe to be a lost golden city, El Dorado. El Dorado actually means the golden one. So in the Uncharted games, and I guess I've looked into this a little bit because I love reading about this shit. There are people who believe El Dorado is actually a golden statue. So now, we go to the Amazon. Drake and Elena, they're in one helicopter, and Navarro and Roman are in a different one. And, they're going into the jungle. And Drake and Elena, they end up, fighting off their guards and crashing the one helicopter. And they end up finding a... what's it called? Like some tribal men. They they're in the jungle, and they get caught by a bunch of guys with like spears and blowguns, and they start chasing them through the jungle, and they jump into off a cliff away from them and find a Russian submarine just like in the middle of the jungle, which is what happens at the beginning of the Uncharted video game, except in the video game it's a German submarine, like World War II German submarine. So they go inside the submarine, and they're looking, to find whatever they can, and they find a bunch of corpses of Russian soldiers and a journal. And while this is going on, Navarro and Roman, they find a temple, and, they need to get inside to find El Dorado. And Roman's like, yeah, just fucking blow a hole in it. Who cares? And this really pisses off Navarro, because this is his heritage, Like we have the comment at the beginning of the movie where... Roman he's like a fucking blunt instrument. He just wants to get his shit and be done with it. But Navarro is like, this is my heritage, I am trying to protect it. And, he has a scheme that will be revealed shortly. So, he's all pissed off as they're just blowing holes in this shit, trying to get through. And while this is going on, Elena and Drake find a journal, and they discover... like what the Russians had discovered is that El Dorado is like a statue that's actually built around a meteorite, and the meteorite carried this like gross shit with it, and it's similar to what happens in the game. So in the game, when they find El Dorado, I think it's actually like a giant sarcophagus, and when they open it, there's like a cursed body inside, and the Tomb Raider movie actually kind of steals this idea. So the body is carrying a disease the same way in this, like the meteorite is carrying a microbe. And when it's opened, and people come in contact with it, it's essentially like the super plague. But in Uncharted, it also turns them into like wild monsters. So like in the game, you're fighting like a bunker full of like old German soldiers and shit who've succumbed to this and have just been living like the creatures from The Descent. In this bunker, and this is it's only a couple people that it happens to, but so Drake and Elena, as Navarro and Roman are busting their way through the temple, and they find these tunnels underneath. Drake and Elena, they climb down into a sinkhole into like these catacombs, and they find an underwater path that leads them into the lower chamber, which is like the El Dorado chamber, and they find the gold El Dorado statue. And they also find a room off to the side full of like a ton of gold and a bunch of skeletons, including the skeleton of Sir Francis Drake. And they find like a piece of paper that he had written, discussing, they found this place and it's horrible, so they're going to stay there and make sure nobody else finds it. And also, the biggest regret is that he's never going to get to see his newborn son. Wink, wink. Is he really a Drake? The movie appears to say so. They never give you a confirmation, but it's definitely like, hey, maybe my parents were onto something. And but they never say like, I am the descendant of Sir Francis Drake, which is good because then they could easily retcon it in the movies like they did in the game if it ever actually happened. Even though this version of the movie is probably never going to see the light of day. As this is happening, the ceiling of the chamber gets blown open, and Roman and Navarro and all of our men, they come in and they find the El Dorado statue, and it has all these it's basically like a puzzle on the front of it, like these things you have to turn and dial into the proper setting. And Navarro starts doing this as Drake and Elena get caught by Roman's men, and as Roman is, giving his evil guy speech to them, Navarro is opening it, and Drake and them are warning us like, dude, don't fucking let him open that, like shoot him right now, like this is some wicked shit. But then Navarro gets it open, and the shit gets out, and everybody who doesn't cover their mouth or put on a gas mask, like all Navarro's men put on gas masks, and Roman's men don't, and they all get infected, and Roman starts turning into one of these monsters. And Drake and Elena take their chances and they take off running, and things start descending into chaos. Like Navarro's men start killing Gabriel's men, and Gabriel, mutated, goes after Drake, and Drake's able to friggin' blow his head off with a shotgun. One thing I will say is this script doesn't really hold back. It's written as a rated R. There's a lot of swearing. A lot of the violence is pretty brutal, but I don't think an Uncharted movie should be rated R. It should be like a PG-13 adventure movie. Like, I want something that's Indiana Jones meets The Mummy from like the Brendan Fraser Mummy. Like, that's what I'm looking for, but with like a modern take on that. And we don't get a lot of adventure movies like that. The closest thing we do is like comic book movies. Like, technically those are like adventures, but not in that kind of globe-trotting sense. And this kind of reads like a James Bond movie. I guess that is kind of the equivalent, but James Bond isn't like on archaeological adventures. He's like a spy, and it's not the same thing, but a similar kind of tone. So I guess what I'm saying is get Sam Mendes to make the Uncharted movie. Oh, goddamn, that's actually a good idea. As all this is going on, Navarro, he gets the statue hooked up to a helicopter that starts lifting it out of the tunnel or the catacomb. And as Drake and Elena, they're on the surface. Drake sees this and he just starts, running, and he jumps and grabs onto the netting on the statue as he gets, the helicopter's lifting him up. Men from the helicopter see this and they open the rear hatch and they're shooting at Drake, but then Elena shoots them from the ground, leading to Navarro getting onto the netting and going after Drake, and they're on opposite sides. They end up releasing the statue from the helicopter, and it lands into the Amazon River and starts to sink, obviously, very quickly. Navarro and Drake are fighting, and Drake grabs the necklace, or the ring on the necklace, which Navarro has on, and he pulls it, causing Navarro to get tangled up in the netting. And as Drake gets away, the statue falls and crushes Navarro's head at the bottom of the river. Drake gets away, the statue is lost, or, stuck at the bottom of the river anyway. And, all's well that ends well. We get a bit of a wrap up here. Elena goes back to her bosses and said like, yeah, he kidnapped me, and, he got away. There's like, you expect us to believe this? And she's kind of just like, yeah, believe what you want. And we find out that Sully was in fact alive, and, he's in the hospital. So Elena, she goes and meets Drake, and they're like, yeah, we're going to go recover the statue so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, which I think is kind of a bad, usually in situations like this, it's like, oh, we don't want anybody to have the statue. It's not like your government's going to be more responsible with it than anyone else's, because because of this microbe, it could be a weapon, but this doesn't do that. It's just like, no, they're going to go recover it, and they're going to recover that gold or whatever, It's a shame you weren't able to get any, blah, blah, blah. And Drake's like, yeah, it'll be okay. So, and then she gives him a folder revealing, that Sully is alive and all that. So then we are now intercut with, the hospital where Sully is, and them talking about like, oh, yeah, this old man, he's in there recovering, with Elena going to get the statue and the gold. And so, she gets to the room where all the gold and the skeletons should be, and it's empty. And there's a note left for her from Drake. You want what you can't have, or you want but you can't have. The same as, she left him the note, and it looks like somehow he got the gold. And then he also rescues Sully from the hospital, and they kind of run away, and live off together to have future adventures. It's kind of left with some repeating of his father's dialogue about Sir Francis Drake and basically like their legacy and stuff like that. And the movie comes to an end. So does it feel like an Uncharted movie? I would say it does. As I said, not 100% accurate. There are some liberties taken which, perfectly suit the plot. It's one of those things that when you're adapting a story, you're gonna have to take some privileges with it. And I know a lot of people don't understand this. Of like, oh man, the story was so good in the game and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, but that's a story being told over 10 to 15 hours versus we got to tell this story in like at most 2 hours a lot of the time, maybe 3 given like something like Avengers. But like some of that stuff is fine. Like this is a better version versus you look at what was being said about the David O. Russell movie, and it's like, oh, we're gonna have Robert De Niro as Sully and Joe Pesci as like another family member, and it's gonna be like a family globe-trotting movie. And it's like, no. And I think Sully was gonna be Drake's dad or something, and it's just like, this is not what that story was. And like you don't need that stuff. Like I don't even understand really why you want to add this family element to it. It's not like as the Uncharted games went on, like family became a little more important because they introduced his brother and him and Elena get married in the 4th game. And that stuff's great because it's earned over the course of those 3 games. And, it's got a purpose. Making Sully his dad just kind of makes no sense. And I don't think it's necessary. This at least captures what I would want in an Uncharted movie. It's got some great set pieces, which that became part of the series in the like starting from the 2nd game on. Like the 1st game didn't have a lot of that, but the 1st game was the 1st game. They were focusing on their story and they created great characters and they did what they did. And now we got to blow it up and make it awesome. And they did, like 2 and 3 and 4 to have like amazing set pieces. And like, you feel like you're playing an action movie. And I do think the best set piece comes in the beginning. It's one of those set pieces that just keeps ramping up the tension and it's awesome and exciting. And then they never really hit that high again throughout the script. But, what they have there is really good and I like it a lot. But I would have liked to have seen some more of that. But it would have been a good movie. I think it would have been like just fine. Maybe like a 3 out of 5, a 4 out of 5 if it was really well directed. But it'd be like, yeah, they got the Unchartedness in there, but there is a lot more globetrotting to less exotic occasions. Like I don't really find like a lot of civilizations to be like going to London is not that exciting in a movie like this. What I like about the first Uncharted is that one isn't so much a globe-trotting game. Like the entire game takes place on this one island, which is something I kind of like. Of like, oh, we're all trapped on this island where we're discovering this stuff and this shit is happening. It was like 2 and 3 and 4 is where it all became about globe-trotting. And even in 4, it's like there's globe-trotting, but then you spend like the back half all in this one place looking for this lost like pirate city, and that stuff's like awesome. And I wish there would be more of that in this. It's like, we're kind of traveling to a lot of different locations, but there are locations where it's like, we're in Panama and we're in this place, and we're not like searching through a jungle for a lost city. It's just like, nah, we're in like Mexico talking to this dude. And that kind of stuff is like a little bit of a bummer. But I do, you get the last half of like, hey, we go to the Amazon and there's some stuff. I would just like to see more of an Uncharted movie take place, and I want to see more of that exploration and more of that discovery. Like, I want to see it actually taking place and not just reading coordinates on a map and like a Panama internet cafe and stuff like that. So that's, kind of my major complaints. But I will say all the dialogue, I'm not reading it on the podcast, but the dialogue is all really good. Like, they really capture Drake as kind of this snarky asshole, and all the dialogue in particular with him and Elena is some of the best stuff in the script. Sully is also really good. The villains are what they are, I think they're fairly well written. They're not featured a lot in it, so I don't think they would have been like super memorable villains or anything. But they are good. They're good for this movie, and it is Drake and the relationships with Elena and Sully that would really carry the film, and are some of my favorite parts in it. And I think that's all I pretty much have to say. I love a good video game movie, and I think if this script had the budget and the direction turned out, I think it would have been one of the better video game movies. Like, it definitely would have cracked my top 5. Like, currently my top 5 video game movies, and I think I love all these movies unironically. Number 1, Mortal Kombat. It's perfect film. Number 2 would be Assassin's Creed. I actually think it's really good. It perfectly conveys that franchise. It has some cheesy motivation and dialogue moments in it, but overall I think it's a really well-made movie. Tomb Raider, the new one, and they just announced they're doing a sequel, which I am super excited for, because I thought that Tomb Raider movie was legit really good. It's not blowing anybody away, but it's very well made. Perfectly follows like the Tomb Raider story. Doesn't get overly cheesy. Spends maybe a little too much time in the beginning, like setting things up, versus like, hey, we just want to get to the tomb raiding. But that's what a sequel's for, and hopefully this announced sequel happens. Number 4, Silent Hill. It's a great movie. Again, captures the tone of the game, which the tone and setting is very important. The music, the fact that they just use the music from the game, is one of my favorite things. And then number 5, which is one I'm kind of waiting for someone to bump off, which is Prince of Persia. Doesn't really follow the story like incredibly well, but is a fun, entertaining adventure film, and like has enough from the games that you're like, all right, yeah, this is good. Like, I could start digging into animated movies that would be way better, but like, for example, the Resident Evil animated movies are all really good. But this one is I think this would have easily knocked off Prince of Persia and probably taken that 5th spot, but I don't think it would have been like that much better than that. But yeah, so that's going to be it for today's episode. It is good to be back. I was definitely a little rocky. I have my next script picked out, so as soon as I can get to it, it'll at least be a couple weeks. I'm hoping to next week, now that it's been out for a little while, and I don't have to worry about spoilers, because as I am recording this, Avengers Endgame has beaten Titanic as the second highest grossing movie of all time. And I'm really hoping it goes on to beat Avatar, because I personally like Avatar. I think it's a great movie. A mediocre story that's been done to death, but done in a really good, big, huge movie that created a great world. And I am excited for the sequels. I don't think it should be the number 1 movie of all time. So I'm glad to see Avengers take that down. So hopefully it does. I mean, it beat Titanic in 2 weeks, which is insane. Titanic was in the theater for like 41 weeks, something insane. Like, the only reason it was number 2 is because it was kept in the theater for so long. But yeah, so yeah, that's going to be it. Be sure to follow us on social media at Shells Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to email into the show, suggestions, you got some scripts or something, or some questions that you want read on the the podcast, email me at shelvedfilmpodcast@gmail.com. I'm not going to give a hint at what my next script is yet. I will say it is a comic book movie. That is all I will say. But yeah, thanks for listening. Be sure to rate and subscribe on iTunes. Give that show 5 stars and be like, yeah, even though he doesn't post all the time, I really like the episodes. I would appreciate it, and it'd be the best way to help the show, and honestly would inspire me to fucking kick my ass in gear and do more episodes. So if that's what you're looking for, that's the best way to do it. I hope my sick voice didn't get in the way too much of this. I feel some burning in my throat now from all this talking, and also I just had some popcorn before this. But that's going to be it for today's episode. Also, we have the Patreon, patreon.com/shelved or shelved podcast, one of those two. It's pinned on my Twitter, so if you find the Twitter or the Facebook, you can find that as well. Yeah, so that's going to be it. Thank you for listening, and probably Avengers Endgame review coming up next, right before our next script. So we'll see you then.